tackle vocab and context questions, do you feel like you're never quite sure if you've chosen the right word? Hi, I'm Megan with Principia Tutors and Consultants, and today we are going to learn some strategies for vocab and context questions so that instead of choosing a word and kind of hoping for the best, you feel confident in the way you've approached the question. So we're going to begin by discussing some broad strategies. What we want to first do is not look at the answer choices. And this might feel initially a little counterintuitive because you'll be like, how am I supposed to answer the question? But I'll explain why this works for this question type. Often, if we read through the paragraph and then kind of plug in each of the answer choices into the blank, one of the words might sound right, but it won't be actually the correct answer. So we want to be thinking about some of the bigger picture reasons as to why an answer is going to be correct. So what we want to do instead is come up with our own word. We'll do this by identifying adjectives, by thinking just about what we're talking about. And if for some reason you're not able to come up with your own word, that is totally okay. That definitely happens. Like I said, you can look for other adjectives, like if the word we have to choose is an adjective and is describing a noun, we can see if that noun occurs elsewhere within the paragraph and see how it's being described or talked about in different places. We can also describe or identify the tone. Is it more positive? Is it more negative? All of these are going to be impacting the word that we ultimately choose. Once we've done all of this, now we can look at the answer choices. If we came up with our own word, we can see if any of the words match the one we came up with, which is really, really satisfying when that happens. Or we want to look at each word's connotation, tone, and register. So connotation is not only the literal definition of the word, it is how we use it. Do we only really use it to describe abstract things? Do we only really use it when we're talking about like tangible things that we can see? So we want to be thinking about that. We also want to be thinking about tone. Tone is how positive or negative the word is. If our passage is positive but leaning a little bit more neutral, we're not going to want to choose a word that's extremely positive. That's not going to match up with what we're talking about here. And then lastly, we want to think about register. So you're probably already pretty familiar with connotation and tone. You've heard those in your English classes. Register means how formal a word is. So the sentence, I got an A, is way more informal than the sentence, I achieved a high score on my last exam. So we want to be thinking about, okay, would I use this word in an academic paper? Would I use this in a conversation with friends? And see which of these matches up with the passage itself. Now that we've discussed some broad strategies, let's dive in and check a few questions out. So for this first question, I haven't given you access to the answer choices yet because we're going to try to come up with our own word. So let's give this passage a read. The following is an excerpt from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Thus, though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been associated with long delays. In all history, there is no instance of a country having benefited from blank warfare. Only one who knows the disastrous effects of a long war can realize the supreme importance of rapidity in bringing it to a close. It is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war who can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on. Okay, so if we're looking at this, I would probably say a word like long. We discussed the word war in the sentence after the sentence that has the blank, and since it says long war, we're probably going to want a word that means long. So let's look at our answer choices and see if long matches up with any of those choices. And number one, A is prolonged. So that is what is working best in this case. But let's look at the other answer choices to see why they're incorrect. So dreary, it definitely has like that negative kind of tone we're thinking about. But dreary, I'm thinking rainy, cloudy. We're not talking about weather at all here. So B is wrong. Brief is just the opposite of what we want. We do talk in the very beginning about stupid haste, but we're kind of contrasting it to say like being too quick with war is bad, but being too long is bad too. And then we talk about that second part throughout. Everlasting does mean long, but everlasting is way too extreme in this case. So everlasting means never ending, going on, and we don't have any other details within the paragraph that shows that we're talking about never-ending warfare. That's definitely too extreme in this case. Again, A is correct. Let's look at another example. So this one is from To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Since he belonged, even at the age of 6, to that great clan which cannot keep this feeling separate from that, but must let future prospects with their joys and sorrows cloud what is actually at hand. since to such people, even in earliest childhood, any turn in the wheel of sensation has the power to blank and transfix the moment upon which its gloom or radiance rests. James Ramsay, sitting on the floor, cutting out pictures from the illustrated catalog of the Army and Navy stores, endowed the picture of a refrigerator as his mother spoke with heavenly bliss. It was fringed with joy. Okay. Immediately, I don't know if I would necessarily be able to come up with a word since there's like a few different things going on, but since we have the conjunction and right after the blank, that is golden for finding the correct answer. So whenever we have a conjunction, we want to think about, okay, since we're connecting these two words, what's the relationship? And is a continue word. So we're going to want a word that's pretty much synonymous to the word transfix. If the word was but, we're going to want a word that's going to be opposite of transfix. So transfix means to kind of hold in place, like to pierce. So I want a word that means like to hold in place. So associate, that's not going to work. Disintegrate, that's kind of the opposite. Adapt just means to change. That doesn't mean to specifically hold in place. Crystallize means to solidify or to take form. So D is going to be the correct answer. And I'll point out why it's important to look at the other words, because I could easily throw in the word has the power to adapt and transfix, and that sounds fine. Or like associate and transfix. Immediately, we might not really necessarily know which one of these works better. But if we look at the other words within the sentence and think about the relationships between them, we can more confidently come up with the correct answer. And again, crystallize is the correct choice. All right, now it's going to be your turn. So take a second and pause the video and see what you come up with. Okay, let's dive in and check this out. So we're talking about this book. We're saying the volume itself is blank. So what we want to be keeping in mind is that whenever there's a dash or a colon, that's working as an arrow, and that's kind of describing the earlier part of the sentence. We're talking about inlaid with gold tablature, veiled by protective layers, like engraved, like all of these sound like very beautiful, very over the top. So that is going to be what is leading us to choose the word that we do. And the correct word here is enchanting. Yeah, we might think the word might be massive if we just fill it in, because massive is like, this sounds like a very big book. It's talking about more than 80 wonders. It has 52 illustrations. But since we're trying to think about the relationship of the word to the rest of the sentence, since we're discussing how beautiful it is, we want a word that matches up with that. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things we're keeping in mind to wrap things up. We want to come up with our own word. We don't want to be swayed by the answer choices. We want to look for context clues within the passage to help us identify the tone, or look for other synonyms to help us feel confident in the word that we're choosing. And lastly, we're thinking about each word's connotation, tone, and register. And with these tools, you can feel confident about how you're approaching the question. And so then you don't have to stress that you're just choosing a word willy-nilly.